Hey guys, I'm sorry this video comes with quite a bit of a delay. I've had some trouble with a wisdom tooth these last few weeks, but that is all over now and I finally feel up to the task of recommending some wintry romances to you. So I've got 8 romances for you that are for the most part novella length, but some are a bit longer, some are a bit shorter, more like short stories, and they are all male-male romances. I'm going to start with a few that aren't really holiday themed, but only take place in winter and have a wintry, frosty, cold atmosphere to them. My first one is one of my favorite reads of the year 2020. In fact, quite a few titles on this list are on my favorites of 2020 list. But the first one is Division Bells by Iona Datt Sharma. It takes place over the course of several weeks or months, even in winter, and yes, over Christmas as well, but Christmas really plays a tiny role only. But the cold and the miserable weather play a key part in the atmosphere of the book. It is set in London, so the winter here isn't the fairy tale winter of the Winter Wonderland, but rather a wet, dreary, miserable affair, which makes the warmth of the interiors and of the relationships that are described stand out even more. The story is set in the UK Parliament and it's a opposites attract romance as well as an enemies to lovers kind of story. The protagonists are a civil servant at the Parliament and a special advisor to a minister who clash over questions of proper procedure. These enemies to lovers stories can be quite exaggerated and overly dramatic and unrealistic, but this one is, as far as I can tell, a very realistic one. It is definitely a very low-key one, and I liked it all the more for that. I'm not one for these over-exaggerated rom-com type of stories. My second recommendation is the only one that I have in physical format. It's The Fairy Hounds of York by Arden Powell. This is a historical fantasy romance. It's set in 1810 and it is about a young man who finds himself under a curse that is trying to pull him into the land of the fairies. It's even gotten him to travel unconsciously from London to his old home in Yorkshire. And there, in addition to being in danger from the curse, he is also in danger from the mysterious ghostly fairy hounds whose howling marks you for an early death. But he gets help from a mysterious traveler, like capital T traveler, who has a bit of experience with the issue of fairy curses and has a reason of his own to oppose the fairies. This one has just the most marvelous, frosty, wintry atmosphere to it. It's just the best thing in the world to snuggle up with this one under a cozy blanket and be swept away by the wintry atmosphere. The next one is another historical, but without any fantasy elements this time. It's The Only Gold by Tamara. And this one, in my opinion, is an actual historical novel with an actual historical setting. The setting is not some made-up fantasy power historical cliche like what you get in so many historical romances, but this one is an actual well-researched historical setting. The story takes place at the end of the 19th century and over the course of several weeks in winter in New York City. And the last climactic scenes take place during a huge blizzard. It is kind of a reverse heist story. It takes place in a bank where our protagonist is assistant cashier with hopes of becoming cashier, of replacing the retiring cashier. hopes that are shattered when, completely out of the blue, the bank hires a stranger from outside to replace the retiring cashier just weeks before an important gold deposit is scheduled to arrive at the bank. Then back into the present day, Life After Joe by Harper Fox is a kind of a Christmas romance, but it is not your typical cozy holiday romance. It's the story of a man whose life has been turned upside down when his partner and best friend since kindergarten suddenly had a delayed quarter-life crisis and out of the blue left him, and for a woman no less, and now his life is in pieces and his whole identity has been shattered. And that has set him on a path of rather self-destructive coping behavior, or non-coping behavior, it's more like it. But of course, everything will be all right at the end. A word of warning though, Harper Fox's stories tend to escalate towards the ending in like a car crash, helicopter ride kind of escalation. It can be a bit ridiculous and off-putting, but I think it's just this side of too ridiculous in the case of this story. Another fantasy romance, this a very short one, is Holly and Oak by R. Cooper. Not all of R. Cooper's books work for me, but those that do work for me hard. And Holly and Oak is one of those. It is the second book in a loose series called Familiar Spirits, which is about witches in New England or New England-ish small towns. In this one, two young men are trapped in a perpetual yearly and year-long ritual that is done to ensure the prosperity of the town, to ensure that the town thrives. And the two young men represent and channel two opposing forces, summer and winter, like Summer King and Winter King, where one waxes, the other wanes, and vice versa. The problem is the two kings are kind of at odds with this antagonistic relationship that this ritual puts them in, because at the bottom of their hearts they are the opposite of antagonistic towards each other. This is a very sweet and atmospheric story that is full of angst. Angst is probably the thing that R. Cooper does best, and it happens to be one of the things that I love best, so I absolutely love this story. And another very angsty holiday romance by R. Cooper, this time a Christian holiday one, is A Wealth of Unsaid Words. This one is really rather a short story, and it takes place over a couple of days over Christmas and essentially in one house where two old friends reunite with their family, and it's a second chance romance essentially. And there's a lot of cookie baking and Christmas tree decorating, but it's really, I promise, it's not twee. There is altogether too much angst in this story for it to be twee. But I do have a Christmas romance for you that is somewhat twee. It's called Not Over Yet by Barbara Ellsborg. This one is the most by-the-book romance of the lot. It is, strictly speaking, fantasy. It's the story of an elf, a Christmas elf, who feels alienated from his elf family, but tragically has never found anybody in the human world who has wanted him to stay. And this year is his last chance. And his siblings drop him off in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in the snow, and he ends up in a cottage with a quasi-hermit who can do with a little bit of Christmas cheer in his life. And I can't let you go without recommending The Douglas Fir by Anyta Sunday. This one's different from all the other novels that I recommended. because it is set in the southern hemisphere in New Zealand, and there is a lot of summer surfing and swimming lessons going on, as well as Christmas cheer. The protagonist in this one has designed an elaborate plan to give the best Christmas present in the world to his tragically heterosexual best friend, with the ulterior motive of making that best friend fall in love with him after all. This one is going to make you smile, I promise. So these are, as of today, my favorite holiday romances and winter romances that I like to recommend. There's a lot of angst in this lot, but also a lot of cheer and a lot of warmth in spite of the cold, frosty, gloomy settings of most of them. If you know any additional romances that fit this description and this recipe, so to speak, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And I'll see you very soon with another video, guys. Happy holiday reading. Bye!